everything that we have going on in our consciousness, which can be defined as our mind plus an all-encompassing awareness. And that aspect of us is what's really determining our physical experiences. And we're able to actually scientifically verify this now. And it's so in its infancy that to some people it's hard to grasp because it's a little elusive, right? Like I can't give you a bowl of happiness or a bowl of sadness, but you know they're real and you know they impact your life. So we're learning different ways to express that energetic aspect in the physical world. And that's what's happening right now.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hi there, Savannah family. Welcome back to the show. I'm excited to talk to you today about something that I just don't think we talk about enough. And before I tell you what it is, I want to ask you a few questions. Do you go through your day with what feels like constant low-grade stress? Are you having a hard time losing weight, even though you're putting in a ton of effort? Are you feeling irritable or sleeping poorly? Well, today we're welcoming back to the show Teri Mosey, Ph.D, to talk to us about why any of the above things might be happening. And it turns out the answer might be hormonal imbalance. Teri is an international speaker, wellness consultant, and the author of The Hidden Messages in Food. She's earned a bachelor's degree in biochemistry, a master's degree in exercise physiology, and a doctorate in holistic nutrition. She's also a graduate of culinary studies, so she really knows her stuff. Today, she's here to tell us the huge role that hormones play in our health and what you can do to find internal balance naturally with these chemical messengers. As we'll find out in today's episode, there are way more hormones in men and women's bodies than just estrogen and testosterone. So we're gonna learn about and explore other hormones and answer one of my big burning questions. Will restorative yoga or power yoga help you lose weight faster? I think the answer will surprise you. Before we dive in, please support the show. The best way is to make a purchase on SavannahSpirit.com. Today, I'm highlighting their Himalayan salt lamp. I don't know if you've heard about the healing benefits of salt lamps, but a lot of people I know love them. They emit negative ions, which can improve the quality of the air that you're breathing, help you sleep better, and increase levels of serotonin in your brain. They're also just beautiful. And for new customers of Savannah Spirit, you can take $25 off a Himalayan salt lamp or anything you find that you like at their online store. Just use that coupon code TAKE25. All right, let's dive into talking about hormones with Teri. Teri, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad you're here. And today we're going to go deep into hormone balancing, which I feel like is more relevant today than ever before. I feel like so many women have questions about this. Have you found this to be your experience as well?
Yes, I find that there is just a shift with many people. And I know the stereotype is when we think balancing hormones that it's women going through their cycles. But it's actually just hormone imbalances in general. And we're starting to see them becoming so prevalent now. And it's because we live, a life that's just a little bit more fast paced, a little bit more in the excess. There's just a lot going on. And we're not really finding our ground as a society as quickly as we used to.
And so this is something that men should be aware of as well, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It's not just for women. It's not just for men. It's going to be for anyone who is just trying to find that balance within. And those hormones are basically just the chemical messengers that help the communication happen within your body.
And so what are some of the common, and I hate using the word like disease, but what are some of the common things that having out of balance hormones causes? For example, an overactive thyroid, hyperthyroidism, right? Or what are some of the other things that really it's like hormones are the underlying culprit?
Well, we're finding that hormones are connected to a lot of illnesses. And so digestive issues, you can have shortness of breath. You can feel fatigued all the time. You can start to have high blood pressure. You struggle with your weight. And sometimes it could be a little bit more in the belly area. You don't sleep very well, so you're waking up at 3 a.m. watching really bad reruns of Law and Order. You have a lack of motivation. You can become more anxious, so your coping skills are off. And even if you're an athlete And you can still have a balance in hormones in that you're not able to recover from your workouts as well, or you can't run as fast anymore, or you just don't even feel the motivation to even go and exercise. So hormones can hit us in all different ways, and it's going to be specific to that person's makeup and what's happening for them.
It really just seems like they're at the root of everything when you put it that way. And so we really want to know what's going on. And I think the first step is like, how do we even know if there's an issue? I mean, I guess if we're feeling lethargic, or maybe we're overweight, or there might be some obvious things. But what can you maybe talk about the key hormones that are at play in the body? Maybe we can just sort of start to define some terms.
Sure. So when we talk about some of the key hormones, we've all heard of cortisol, so he is been named like the master enemy of our metabolism and our stress and stuff like that. And cortisol does play a role in our stress axis. It also does help for us to metabolize nutrients. It helps us think clearly and is part of our immunity. So I just want to always redeem and understand that it's never just one hormone that causes our problems. Even though if somebody is struggling, say, with their reproductive function hormones, it's not estrogen's fault. They're all kind of intertwined together. So we have our reproductive hormones, we have cortisol, we have adrenaline, so our fight or flight guy. We have insulin. We have what's called DHEA, which is like one of the mother hormones inside our body that helps our cell repair. Here's the thing, that everything in the body is constantly renewing itself. So we need all these hormones to be working in a balanced fashion so that we can keep regenerating and keep renewing our cells, because all the time we're changing. So our lining of our digestive system, it actually changes over every 3 to 4 days. That's why a consistent eating pattern is so important, because it helps to maintain the rest of you. So all of your body is changing over to be something new. To about 7 to 10 years, you are physically an entirely new person.
I know, I love that. And I say that to people all the time when I teach yoga or run trainings, because I think it's so inspiring, because we get so set in our ways and we think we're a certain way. We even like to talk about ourselves saying like, well, I'm so blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, actually, no, everything's a possibility and you're actually a whole new person every 7 years. So can you talk us through a little bit about how cells regenerate, and do they need hormones to regenerate? I am not a science person, so I know you are, and I'd love to learn from you.
So the hormones are orchestrating it. They're the communicators that are helping the cells know what to do. And so our body is designed to keep the cells will do their act, and then they're going to die. They actually just self-kill themselves. And then I don't want to say the word suicide, but they are. The cells kill themselves, and then we regenerate more. And we're doing this every millisecond that you don't even know it's happening. And it's just part of our innate intelligence. It's our gift from the universe. That's what allows us to be alive and to be having this human experience, is all those involuntary actions happening. And we know that the hormones are the ones that are basically guiding it as to whether they're going to be able to renew properly or not. And when they're not able to, what happens is parts of the body start to overwork. And when the body starts to overwork, then it starts to underfunction. And then that's when we start to see changes in our hormones. And then we start to see maybe some cellular or tissue disease. And then we're diagnosed with an illness. So it always starts where the body really tries hard to get you back into balance. So if you're already experiencing some type of physical ailments, then that means it's been happening for quite some time. You didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, well, last week I didn't sleep so well and I didn't eat well because I was traveling. That's why my hormones are off. It takes a lot longer, almost decades, for this to happen.
And Teri, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times we end up in a state of extreme dysfunction, right? And so we are prescribed some kind of medication or some sort of drug. And a lot of prescription medications actually affect our hormones. And so, but that's happening in an artificial way. That's
correct. They are impacting our hormones, but they're impacting them because the object there is, in Western medicine, is to silence the symptoms. And that's the problem, is we can seriously take many medications and silence our symptoms, but the issues underneath with your hormones is still brewing. It's still happening. And so it's going to reap its ugly head just in a different way.
It's so sad when we think of it that way, right? The silencing of the symptoms, because based on the previous interview I did with you and then talking about this now, it's so clear how that isn't beneficial, right? I mean, it's maybe beneficial in the short term, but that there's still all this dysfunction underneath. So what advice do you have for folks who are maybe, taking medications or, becoming more aware of all of this and wanting to shift? Because I think what it really requires is like really good detective work, right? To figure out what's the root cause of the imbalance, right?
Well, there are ways that you can go about it. And sure, if you want to really dissect and get to the specifics of it, but what we're learning in all the different new scientific disciplines that are blending together right now is that when we talk about hormones and how they're functioning, is that it's a systemic issue, right? So even though we could technically go ahead and try to find the fault of certain hormones, instead of doing that, we can go back to its origin. And origin still takes us back to the HPA stress axis. So whether it's real or perceived, and it takes us back to the mind, it takes us back to consciousness, which we now is at the origin of everything we experience, is that if we can go and figure out ways to decrease our stress, all those different pathways, all those hormones that I mentioned that touch each other will start to get back into balance. You don't have to go after one. You just need to go after the entire system.
It's interesting because when I teach restorative yoga, one of the anecdotes I like to share is this study. And of course, I'm not going to remember right now exactly what university and what year, but it was basically this weight loss study. And they found that people, the group that did restorative yoga, which is the type of yoga where you don't even move, right? You're just resting on blocks and cushions and things like that, 3 times a week actually lost weight more than the group that was like doing cardio and all the typical things you think would help someone lose weight. And I'm guessing that that's what ties into this, right? It's because in doing that rest, that relaxation, it was giving the body a chance, the hormones a chance to rebalance. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes. And it's hard for us to swallow something like that because we're always told, well, if you need to lose weight, you need to just, calories in, calories out, and then exercise like a crazy person. And where I would rather you go to your restorative yoga class and meditate, because that's people who meditate and do restorative yoga are going to lose weight faster and actually keep it off.
Right. It's like keeping it off too. That's so important.
Yes. Because we can tease our body as much as we want with all these different diets, but sooner or later they win, and the hormones go, I don't think so. And they bring you back to where you used to be.
So Teri, I want to ask you about endorphins because I feel like when we do that cardio workout or we run or, we go to the cycling class or whatever, you get that rush of endorphins. Am I talking about the right one? Like that feeling high, right? After you run a marathon or whatever. And that's great. But I think, and I'll put this in really practical terms because I know for me, like as a busy mom too, it's sometimes like, okay, well, do I go for a run or do I do my meditation practice, right? If I only have 30 minutes to myself in a day. And I think as a society as well, like we're very much chasing that endorphin high, but what you're talking about is, or like with the restorative yoga example, we really need to just let the body rest and these things will balance out naturally. So I don't have an exact question. I'm just kind of curious for you to riff on this and talk a little bit about like, if you only do have 30 minutes, like which is the right direction to go in, chasing that endorphin high or maybe lying down and doing restorative yoga or shavasana or something like that.
Yeah. So they're both important. So here's the thing is that when we talk about stress that you get from that high, that's healthy for you. And that's not going to tax your hormones and stress system in a negative manner. We're talking about chronic stress. So people who are functionally stressful, right? Like, you can just make it through your day and it's crazy, but you're just good at it. So you can be in a career that you hate. You can be in a relationship that is really not so good for you, but you're not ready to leave yet. So you can have like chronic stress all the time. That's going to be different to your hormones than the stress of an acute exercise bout. So what I would suggest is if you only have a half hour, you can always alternate on times. You can also meditate half and half. So do a half meditation and then a 15-minute more higher intensity. Or you can even do a meditative run. So you can do exercise in a meditative form, just as you can do yoga in a meditative form. So it's more about recognizing, well, what kind of stress am I applying on my body? Is this a chronic stress or is this a stress that's actually healing to me? There's a difference. And then recognizing that it's not always about like working harder. We're an overachiever society, more, where we even find, and I used to find it so much, it was more difficult for me to do restorative yoga than it was for me to do a hot vinyasa class because you were asking me to sit still. And that was even harder for me. But that is one of the most important things to balancing hormones is also just in that word, balance, is finding a healthy amount of stress, but recognizing when it becomes chronic. And when it does, we need to stop.
And how do you suggest people recognize that? Because I think what's so terrifying, or the experience some people have, is like they go on vacation or they go on a yoga retreat, and just towards the end of that experience, because it takes like 7 days or something for them to really kind of unwind and get calm and feel balanced, then they just sort of have this realization that like, oh my gosh, I've been living in a chronic state of stress and I didn't even know it, right? But I guess my question is, like, is there a way to know if you're operating in a chronic level of stress without, because not everyone even gets to realize that or have that touch point or counterpoint. Like, what are some signals? I mean, I'm guessing kind of like we talked about in our other episode with you, some signals might be like your digestion not working, maybe your reproductive functions not working, if you're not getting your period or having trouble getting pregnant or something like that. Am I kind of on the right track?
You are absolutely on the right track. All of those, as well as just feeling fatigued all the time. You're a little snippy, so you're a little just bratty, even with your family. You just, you're short with them. You don't sleep well. You are struggling with your weight a little bit.
And Teri, I think it's funny because we've mentioned sleep a couple times, and I think so many people don't sleep well.
Sleep is key. Like sleep, and whether you can sleep or not only has a lot to say about your consciousness and your state of mind, it also determines your gut health. And because they're all on the same waves together. So when our gut is healthier, you're going to sleep better. When your mind is calm, your gut is going to be healthier. You're going to sleep better. Do you see the chain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all connected. This is the holistic network at work. This is how we're starting to understand how dynamic the body is. And it's not one thing here, one thing there. We have to bring everything together to its relationships. And one of the most powerful things that we can do is to start to calm that mind. And that's through meditation. So even if you don't have a lot of time, everyone has 5 minutes. I don't care if you have to lock your kids out of the bathroom, right? And say, I'll be right back, whatever it is. And you can sit on the toilet and do it. It doesn't matter. But 5 minutes to yourself can make a wonder into how you're going to react to the rest of your day.
Teri, because you have the science background, I'm wondering, do you think that our traditional Western medicine model, which again is great at a lot of things, but I think isn't in service of some of the things that we're talking about here, do you think that there's a change coming? Do you think that there's going to be a shift in the way people are diagnosed or prescribed medicine for things like some of these common things we've talked about, digestive issues or reproductive issues or even imbalanced hormones, things like that?
Yeah, I absolutely believe so. There is a shift happening. There's certainly a paradigm shift. So we are moving from that mechanical Newtonian way of thinking to a more holistic perspective, thanks to quantum physics. And we are learning a lot more about the different ways that the body is operating, and a lot of different scientific disciplines and different scientists are stepping out of those traditional roles and are working together. And we're learning a lot about how the body actually operates. And they are starting to use these different holistic approaches. It's just when we're talking about uprooting a worldview, it's going to take some time, but we are at the beginning of that paradigm. And I am already seeing glimpses of it.
Teri, would you be willing to define for the listeners the Newtonian model and then the quantum physics way of looking at things? I talk about this in my teacher training and I love it. And I'm curious to see how you're going to explain the two.
I am absolutely in love with quantum physics. So it's really just incredible what we learn now. But so let's start from the beginning. Newtonian thinking is the worldview that we basically use right now in Western medicine. And it is about looking at the world as one big machine. The body is a machine. Everything is mechanical. So it's just all different parts that have their role. Everything's predictable and everything works in an A plus B equals C kind of fashion. And it does explain a lot of the things that we can see with our naked eye in the physical world. And it has carried us very far and has allowed us to learn many things and has its place in our evolution. But over about 100 years ago, quantum physics arrived, and that's when our most current modern scientists started looking at the energy of life. Now, it used to be the energy of life is considered Eastern teachings, right? Traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda. And a lot of people in the Newtonian world would say, well, we can't really prove that, so there's no validity behind that. And then thanks to quantum physics and understanding that the world really is made of energy. So behind everything physical is an energy. And we're now able to mathematically find and calculate it. And it's verifiable and duplicate, we can duplicate it. So it's a true science. It's not this woo-woo, and what we're learning is through quantum physics is that this energy behind us is what is orchestrating every physical experience that we have. And when we start to see that, we realize that everything works in relationships. Nothing is in isolation, and that it all goes back to our consciousness and everything that we have going on in our consciousness, which can be defined as our mind plus an all-encompassing awareness. And that aspect of us is what's really determining our physical experiences. And we're able to actually scientifically verify this now. And it's so in its infancy that to some people it's hard to grasp because it's a little elusive, right? Like I can't give you a bowl of happiness or a bowl of sadness, but they're real and they impact your life. So we're learning different ways to express that energetic aspect in the physical world. And that's what's happening right now. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I love it. And I love how you described it. When I teach this material in my course, it's in the module I have around fascia, because I talk about the Newtonian model being very much about like muscles and bones and dissection. It's like a reductionist mindset, right? If like we can like understand all the parts, then we can understand the sum. And because I have a background in body work as well and massage therapy and myofascial release is really about quantum physics, this idea that actually it's our interconnective tissue that runs through the whole body that really teaches us that everything is interconnected, right? It's like not so much about specific muscles and specific bones, but that, like as you've been saying, consciousness lives in the fascial matrix, which is basically like the saran wrap that surrounds all your muscles, your bones, and that runs from the top of the head to the tips of the toes. And that's just like we're one giant myofascial thing with lots of pockets for different muscles and bones. And it's really exciting. And when you say that science is actually getting behind this and proving it, are there any like studies or examples that you want to share with us?
I don't have any specific offhand, but if you looked into the works of different quantum physicists like Amit Goswami is doing some incredible work. He has some ground pioneer work going on. But there's layers of different scientists. You can even look into Joe Dispenza's work. He's doing some incredible work. And what we're trying to do is have all the disciplines pulled together and say, okay, how can we figure this all out? Because we know it's not separate parts, right? You can go to the doctor for a pulmonary issue or a digestive issue or an immune issue. But when we start to look at it holistically, we realize we need someone who's going to address all of them because they're not separate. That reductionist way of thinking got us to a point to understand the parts, but it is not in context anymore to how much we really know.
Yeah, I love that. And I know it's just like, it's not in service anymore to I think of like seeing all the different specialists. And it's like, you need that person who's going to pull it all together. In your experience, do you think one system, like whether it's the Chinese medicine system or Ayurveda or something else, is like the best equipped to sort of handle the new way or like what we're talking about? Or do you think like whether it's the chakra system or Chinese medicine system, or do you think they're all kind of just talking about subtle energy or prana or this idea of interconnection in the same way? I'm just curious if there's one you particularly love or have gravitated to in your own work.
No, I mean, I resonated a lot with the chakras, and that has been my great way for me to really understand energy from the Eastern perspective. But quantum physics also does a great job. And the thing is that whether you say prana, chi, subtle energy, vital energy, life force, they're all talking about the same thing. They're just changing the language. So when we all start to sit into the same room and have a conversation, we're all kind of saying the same thing. We're just saying it from a little bit of a different perspective, but we're all starting to reach the same endpoint. And that's what's so wonderful. So I don't sit in one camp of thought because all of them I have drawn into. And that's what the holistic paradigm is. That's the new world view that's happening. It's not about saying this is better than that, because sometimes you need to have a higher concentration of one more than the other, depending on what is happening for you. Is it an acute issue? Did you just get hit by a car, right? Or are you suffering from a chronic illness like diabetes? The conversation is going to be different and the needs are going to be different. So I think allowing all of us to play in the sandbox together is what needs to happen.
I love that, and I couldn't agree more. I think kind of where I want to close to come back to our topic, because we've talked about so much, to come back to this idea of hormone balancing. It's like, what advice do you have for listeners who are thinking, I have a hormonal imbalance? Maybe they've been diagnosed with a hormonal imbalance. And they're looking for a way to talk to their physician or talk to their healthcare provider about how they can approach this in a holistic way, as opposed to just, like popping whatever they want to write on the prescription pad in their mouth, right? Like where do you suggest people go? Like, should they be looking for a certain type of doctor? Should they be, just doing more restorative yoga? I don't know. But what tips do you have?
Well, my tips would be to clean up your diet. So whether you want to, however you want to go after that, if you want to meet with someone like myself who does a holistic approach, or you're more comfortable with a dietitian, but cleaning up your diet and doing a more plant-based diet. So honestly, anybody who is struggling with a hormone imbalance, I'm gonna throw you vegan for a short amount of time. I'm not going to wave the flag forever, but I'm going to throw it for a small amount of time, because it alters the different types of foods you're going to get in, the different phytonutrients and the qualities of what's coming in to impact inflammation and other different health concerns. My next would be to feed your friendly bacteria. And then I would ask you to meditate and get your butt into yoga.
I love the last one.
Yes. Yoga was probably one of the I've always exercised, as also having a background as an exercise physiologist, always been big into exercise, and yoga is just absolutely life-changing, especially for people who have had trouble with their hormones, who are always on the go, or just intense active people.
Yeah. And then maybe I'll add to that. And if you let me, it's like, do the restorative practices of yoga too. Because like you said, and I see this every day in all the classes that I teach, like in person, online, wherever, it's like people are struggling with the slowing down practices, the meditative practices, the restorative, the yin, the meditations, right? Like it's much easier and more in people's comfort zone to do the Bikram, the workouts, and there's a place for that as well, but really make sure to do that restoration, because it doesn't come naturally, and society doesn't celebrate us doing that. Unfortunately, there's like no trophies for doing like 5 restorative yoga classes as well. I think, we have all these things like marathons and, all these other things that are much more about the go. So I really think that's such a simple but important shift that people can make, is to just embrace the restorative practices.
I absolutely agree. And sometimes you can't sit by yourself in stillness right away if you're not used to ever meditating. So I would absolutely advocate, please go to restorative yoga, because then you're also around other people. It feels like an activity, so it plays a certain role in what your needs are, but it will still get you to meditate.
Yeah, great tip. Teri, how can people stay connected with your work and potentially even work with you? Because I know you mentioned that. So can you sort of walk people through where to find you, what you do, how they can stay connected?
Absolutely. You can just reach out to me on my website. It's terimosey.com. I do different types of holistic coaching with people. I have online courses if you want to learn on your own, but you can still ask me questions in there. I just released a book called The Hidden Messages in Food. If you really want to dive into eating and the chakras, that's an option. So just reach out to me if you're curious about what the holistic worldview can do for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'll make sure to link all that up in the show notes down below. Savannah listeners, let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can do that at savannahspirit.com/group in our private Facebook group, or of course, a rating or review here on iTunes always means so much. I hope you got value out of today's episode. I hope you're going to do some restorative yoga. I think that's my biggest takeaway from this episode, is that, we just need that time, and our hormones really need that time to rebalance and for ourselves to regenerate. So take some time to rest today. Gift yourself 15, 20 minutes, and I'm sending you so much love from my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode. And thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.